Hello and welcome to Teach First Interview Skills Workshop. This is a workshop delivered by the Pathways career team within Teach First, and my name's Rachel Taylor. I'm a senior officer in the Pathways team. The Pathways team provide career services and advice to ambassadors and second year participants. This is through interview, CV, cover letter and application support, as well as summer projects, career coaching, recruitment and job matching, and supporting people with CPD opportunities. We put together a particular interview workshop as we find that interviews can be extremely challenging, and we want to include a few things in our session today. So firstly, around interview basics, how to prepare for interviews and what to look for before you're attending them. The STAR method, so how to structure your answers in interviews, how to handle difficult questions, tips around verbal and non-verbal communication, and tips around building your confidence before interviews. So firstly, preparation, a really important part of the interview process. And although it sounds very basic, does include quite a few different areas. So firstly, asking for the format of the interview. The more you understand of what format the interview will take, the more you can make sure you're preparing to this format and there won't be any surprises on the day. Also, if you are applying for a school-based role, a teaching role, then asking if you can visit the school, firstly for their benefit, so they can start to see you and see what you're about and your experience and skills and culture match to that school, but also for your benefit, so you can ensure that they're a really good match to you and start to understand them as well. So knowing your own CV and career history. The interview panel will have your CV as the key talking point for the interview. So ensuring that you know what examples you've put on there, what key achievements you've put on there, what statistics and data, if any, you've included, and key points to talk about around that. Examining the role description and creating examples before and ensuring you practice those examples is a really important part of the preparation. We're going to go through in a bit more detail about how to look at the role descriptions and what to pull out from them. Knowing the employer, so ensuring that you've taken time to research the school or organisation that you're looking to work in, understand what their last few years' journey has been, if you can get information in regards to their previous offset inspections, in regards to what their future plans are, understanding the size of the team you'll be working in, understanding the full size of the school or of the organisation. If it's in an organisation, understanding what their successes have been, what challenges they may have faced. Are they national? Are they international? And the more you understand this, the more you can also ensure you're tailoring your interview and your answers and your full application as well for any role to the employer. Having your questions ready at interview and also knowing why you want to work there is a really important part of an interview. There's lots of times where people will talk through their skills and experience extremely well, but when that employer wants to know why is it that they want to work specifically for them and they don't have a very strong answer, it really does have an effect on the impression that they're giving. So some more practical tips. Outfit, ensuring that you dress professionally and plan ahead, ensuring you make a note of the interviewer names and thinking around the time it's going to take to get there, allowing plenty of time in case there is delays, taking a copy of your CV as well as reminders, as well as a list of questions. And just to pull a few of those out there, I really wanted to mention around the interviewer names as well. If you can do some research on who is on the panel, understanding what connection they have to this role, to that school or to that organisation, and being able to demonstrate that you've done that research in the interview is very impressive. And then also taking reminders with you, especially if you struggle at interviews. Lots of people think it will not portray them in a good light if they do take reminders, whereas that is not the case at all. If you're going to take reminders in, I recommend taking bullet points of key successes, key examples of your work history that you know you're going to want to pull out and to highlight, but having them in bullet point form. A danger of having them written out in a full paragraph means you can look down at your paragraph and at your page for long periods of time and you lose eye contact and you lose that engagement with the whole panel. And then finally, that list of questions. So ensuring beforehand that you've prepared a list of questions, thinking about what the future plans are for this role, for this team, for this organisation or school, and how this role fits into that. What would the challenges be in this position, and any other ones that you'd want to take to. So I'd like you now to highlight some words and phrases from the job description you have brought today. So just put it out and look at the key phrases that have been highlighted, especially if things have been repeated or in the person specification, desirable things, as well as kind of key requirements for the role to ensure you're going to be selling yourself as well as possible. And then just jotting down 1 or 2 examples of experience that you've had, or making sure that you're explaining exactly what that particular competency or what that criteria is, so you're going to be able to explain your experience most relevantly. What I recommend doing is just pausing the webinar for a few minutes. If you just hold off to pause it, because I'm going to put it onto one more slide, which is going to show an example of a job description that someone has already looked at, to give you an idea of how you might want to structure that. So you can see here under this example that people have either pulled out times that they've had experience of this that they might want to mention in an interview, or they've even had a look at that criteria and thought, what are they really asking for? What does that mean that they need? And then have done that. So I recommend pausing the webinar now for as long as you'd like, just to go through that document and to highlight areas you think that are of interest. So next are competency-based questions. Competency-based questions are very common on an interview panel. The benefits of them are the fact that they focus on the advertised competencies for the role and also on the organisation's values. This really helps in preparing for interview, because after looking at the job description, after looking at that person specification, you can start to get a bit of a picture around what the competency questions might be and what road they're going to go down to really help you prepare even better. It also enables all candidates to be assessed against the same criteria, so it makes it a very fair process for all applicants. Common competencies do include communication, teamwork, integrity, leadership, planning and organising, and flexibility. And how to structure a competency-based answer. So we recommend using the STAR method, which goes through providing a situation or task, an action, and then a result. So what you would do is briefly describe the situation or background to your example, so it gives context of what you're saying. You would then explain what the actions were, what the tasks were that you undertook, and then you summarise the result. So even if you're discussing a group project or a group task, ensuring you describe what you did rather than the team is very important. And I'd also think about, with the situation, giving enough detail for the interviewer to understand what was involved. So it might include the challenges that you faced within that particular situation. It might include the size of the team or why that situation arose. And then finally, the result. So the result is the most important part of your answer, as it's showing a successful outcome from the actions that you used. So it's showing that those actions that you used were effective. If possible, detail statistics or figures, which is going to really highlight the magnitude of your success. Mention positive feedback that you received and talk about what you learned. I'd also think if there is an example that you know is very, very strong in terms of a very interesting project or new initiative you might have implemented, and all of the steps that you took were really interesting for a potential employer to hear about, but it was not successful, then that is an example you can use. The only thing is you really need to ensure that after you've provided that example, you also explain what you would do differently next time, and also what you learned from it as well. So what I would like people to do now is just to think about turning a value or a competency into a question. So prepare an answer, jot it down in bullet points, and then practice. So here you can pause the webinar for as long as you would like to practice. And an example may be, describe a time that you use communication in a team. Describe a time where you had to work autonomously and what the outcome was. So if you could pause it now, and we'll come back together shortly. So on the slides, there is now some examples of answers from previous questions that we may have asked. What I'd really recommend doing is just having a look through and just reading what the answers were and thinking if that is the type of answer you would have given. Would you have given more detail, and is there extra you could add to that if that was a question that someone asked you? So I'm just going to leave each slide on the screen for a few seconds. If you really want to make notes as well, I recommend pausing the webinar and then starting it up again when you're happy to move on. So next is how to handle difficult questions. So I think everybody has been in an interview situation before when they've been asked one or two questions and your mind completely blanks and you don't have an answer off the top of your head, and it's a really, really frustrating time. So we've just come up with a few different methods and a few different thoughts to have around this. So firstly, to know that they are there to challenge you. The interviewer isn't expecting a smooth answer in every single question that they ask. They are expecting you to sometimes need a minute or two to compose your answer and to have a little bit of a think about what they're going to be looking for. Often questions can be quite long in interview, so I would always ask to have the question repeated, the start or the end, or the whole question if you need, or ask them to clarify what they're looking for you to answer. Think about the role, think about what this role, how this question relates to the role. It can give you an idea of what type of an answer that they would be looking for. And a really important point across the whole of the interview process is not to provide a negative answer. So always ensure that you're describing the positive effect of the situation or the learning within a situation. Going back with a negative thought on the organisation or your line manager does not reflect well on you. So think about linking it to achievement. If there's a very similar example you may be able to give, you can always open with the fact that you have had exposure to a very similar task, and this is what the outcome was, and this is what you did on that task, again, using that STAR method. And if you know there's nothing at that time you can think of, it's completely fine to ask to revisit the question later on in the interview process, and it doesn't have any effect on how you're coming across through that interview. So selling your experience and thinking about what your experience means in terms of skills can sometimes be hard. So we put together a table of teaching experience and then what that relates to in terms of a skill set. And I'm just going to run through them quickly now, just one by one. So firstly, delivering a lesson can be relating to planning and organising. Having new tasks given to be delivered in a set time is managing multiple priorities to conflicting deadlines. Working with parents, colleagues, managers and governors is managing stakeholder relationships with diverse groups. Tracking pupil data is monitoring and evaluation. Analysing pupil data is research and analytical skills. Organising a school trip is event organisation. Lesson observations provide an ability to work under pressure. Planning new lessons is being creative, it's being innovative. Facilitating learning and development, project management. Supporting newly qualified teachers, staff development. Delivering lessons is presenting. Changing lesson plans with short notice is being adaptable, is being flexible. Working in a challenging school is demonstrating resilience. Convincing a pupil to engage with a task is influencing. Working with a colleague on a task is being collaborative. So I'm just going to leave those up on the screen for a few more minutes in case people are taking notes of them. What I recommend doing is, if you are taking notes and there's still a fair few to do, is just pausing your webinar so it gives you a chance to write all of them down and not miss any of them. So confidence and communication in the interview. There's our top tips around this. And firstly, with confidence, I think it's always a really important thing to bear in mind, the fact that you do meet the role criteria, that you have demonstrated through the application process that you have the potential to perform in this role, or you already have that skill set and experience to perform in this role. So remind yourself of that before you go for interview. The reason that you've put that application in is because you believe you will do extremely well in that role and perform excellently. Do your research before interview. It really helps with your confidence on the day. And locate sample questions and practice and practice and practice. The more clear you are in your mind, the more clear and concise your answers will be. Listening is an extremely important part of an interview. People often talk over their interviewers, and it can be very frustrating for the panel. And also it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate active listening. If at the beginning of the interview, the interviewers have explained about a new project that's going to be happening or what the future is of that team, then being able to add a question at the end or asking them to recap or explain it in more detail shows you've been actively listening to them through the process. And finally, having no skeletons as well, making sure that what you've said on your application form or your CV is exactly what you're portraying and exactly what you're explaining in interview. Your LinkedIn profile doesn't have very different dates to it, just making sure that there's that consideration as well through the application. So with communication, body language is very important. I really recommend, before going into the room to interview or before arriving to the location, standing, taking a few deep breaths, thinking and picturing somebody that you see as very, very confident, thinking about their body language, think how they stand, how they talk, and then trying to mirror that in your body language. Again, taking those deep breaths, slowing down, and then walking in the door, ensuring that you do a firm handshake. Be clear, be concise when you're talking. Always look on the bright side of life. So ensuring that positive thinking as well and that positive feedback. Not using any jargon. And also thinking if your answers are matching your presentation. So if you're sitting there and you're you're sitting and answering your questions very, very quietly, and your body language is quite understated, and maybe your handshake was a little bit softer, but they ask you to describe yourself, and you describe yourself as a really extroverted person, really, really outgoing, it doesn't match what you're portraying, and it can concern the interview panel if that happens. So job interview must-dos and job interview don'ts. So firstly, think that it's quality, not quantity of experience. Often people are worried that they're going for a role, other people may have 10 years experience on them and they're not going to be successful because of that. It's not the case at all. The interview panel is looking for quality experience, and think that with your examples as well, providing quality examples to really show you at your best. A lot of the interview, especially the panel, is around convincing the majority that you could do well in the role. And with that, I think a really good technique can be picturing yourself in the role, picturing yourself performing well, doing it on a day-to-day basis, enjoying the role. And the more that you vision that, then the more it will be easy for the interview panel to come to that way of thinking as well. Don't talk yourself out of a job. Silences can be quite hard in interview. It's very natural to want It means that the interviewer often loses the thread of the answer. They can't see what the key result was. They can't see what the key impact was that you did, and they lose what the success was and what you've been trying to demonstrate. So I'd recommend looking at the STAR structure, practicing with that, and then after you have said the result, the outcome and impact, then stop. You'll often get a feel from the interviewers. If they're probing you a lot on every single question, every single answer, then they're wanting a lot of detail. Or it may be that the interviewers have a really high number of questions and they want to get a lot of broad examples, and they may be moving through them slightly faster. So don't talk about changing everything with new ideas. This can be hard when you want to ensure you're showing yourself as being innovative in an interview, and it is important to say that you do have ideas and to demonstrate how you've had ideas in the past. But an interviewer doesn't also want to sit there for 45 minutes or however long the interview may be and hear about what's wrong with their school, what's wrong with their organisation, the fact that you would change this, you would change that, you would change something else because that hasn't been going well, that you saw on the Ofsted report that this was failing, so you would change this. And although they do want people to be creative and they want new ideas to come, also make sure you are being subtle with it as well, or making sure you're referring to kind of the whole organisation vision or the whole school movement as well, so they can see that you'll be working in line with their own strategy. Do focus on what the organisation can do, what you can do for the organisation, rather than what they can do for you. It is quite common in interviews that people often say they really want the role because they haven't had management experience, and this will give them the management experience that they need in the future for their whole career path. Whereas ultimately that organisation, although they appreciate you're going to benefit from their experience, but they do also need to know how they're going to benefit from taking you on, and what value you're going to add for the organisation is really, really key. I wouldn't recommend bringing up salary or benefits during the first interview. And finally, be yourself. It's really important through interviews to try and be as genuine as you can and as relaxed as you can, and show your own personality. This way the interviewers will be able to see how you personally will be able to fit into the team, and how you personally will be able to fit into that school's culture or that organisation's culture. So making sure that you try and be yourself as much as possible. So hopefully that has given you a good idea around how to prepare for an interview using the STAR method and the other tips that we've given. And good luck with your interviews. Thank you very much for watching our webinar. We hope it's been really, really useful. If you do have any further questions, then please don't hesitate to contact us on the Ambassador email printed on the screen. And we hope to speak to you soon.